Welcome to Molden and Schmidt, the podcast where we talk about the future of motoring and crucially how to make it more sustainable. I'm Nick Molden from Emissions Analytics. We're a company that specializes in real world testing of vehicles to get to the bottom of what's really going on. And I'm joined, as always, by Oliver Schmidt.
Hi, my name is Oliver Schmidt. I've been working in the automotive industry for more than 25 years now. And one big part of my business has always been doing negotiations with governments, which leads us right to our topic today.
Absolutely. And again, we're joined by Professor Felix Leach. He's Associate Professor of Engineering Science at the University of Oxford, also author of a book called Racing Towards Zero. Hi, Felix.
Hello.
So in this second series, we've been exploring the big idea that Felix and I have been developing and was published in a book called Critical Mass late last year. The proposition is essentially a radical simplification of how we rate, label and tax cars. And it's called The One Thing You Need to Know About Green Cars because it boils it down to one simple thing, which is vehicle weight. And the previous episodes have been looking at the principles behind this, the science underpinning it. Last episode was about the practicalities of the tax, how would it actually look for a real consumer. But there is one vital other element if this is ever going to become a reality, and that's the politics of it. It might be a brilliant idea, but if it can't find its way onto the political agenda, it won't go anywhere at all. So, question for today is, what will it take for governments to fall in love with this brilliant idea? So that's what we're going to discuss. Oliver's here as our critical friend to ask the really awkward questions and to really probe the validity of this idea. So I think we'll start. So Felix, at a very sort of high level, what do you see as the motivation and incentive for governments to adopt this?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And I think you've sort of laid the groundwork really well here. I think, the critical in the title, critical mass, is kind of the reason I think it is important for governments to look at this, because there are two things, I think, now that are different to, say, 5 or 10 years ago. And the first is that governments are beginning to see a decline in revenue from petrol or gasoline taxes, because the fleet is now shifting towards hybrids and battery electric vehicles that, of course, either use less or no petrol at all. And I think the second reason is linked, is that now you have this mixed powertrain world. There will become a growing sense among all motorists that it's important for people to pay their fair share. And that's inevitably going to be leaking, if you like, into the political world. So I think for those two reasons, governments are going to have to tackle this at some point, acknowledging that messing around with car tax is something that all governments try and avoid doing very hard.
Yeah, I think that's undoubtedly true. And they, in my view, they will be forced to do something at some point. The question is whether they will look forward and do something smoother and in good time and smooth that political path, or whether they'll put it off and off because it's just too hot to handle until it becomes so late that it then becomes a massive crisis. And why it's in this particular case it's quite predictable is because we're on a path to electrification, and electric vehicles attract much lower taxation because of the absence of fuel duty than traditional vehicles. So this is one case where there is really good visibility as to where this thing is going to go. But I still don't have confidence because of the sheer political sensitivity of this topic. I don't have confidence that any politician is going to be far-sighted and confident enough to do anything about it. But I guess I speak from, relatively speaking, a UK perspective. Oliver, what's the perspective from Germany? Do you think the politicians are likely to be more far-sighted about it?
So this is what I'm afraid of. So you bring up a new tax system. So in the last terms, our government was always on the way then just hiring more government officials trying to impose these new taxes. That there was another idea recently. So we have something called the Kindergeld, children's money. So if you have a kid, you get money for the first kid, second kid, and so on. And they had the idea, and you have tax breaks for kids and everything. They had the idea just to put this in a lump sum and then give every child or the parent of the child this sum of money. And the first thing when they came up with this was, oh, we now need 5,000 new officers in our government to hand out this money. And so this was not effective at all. So it would have cost more money in hiring these new officers than the actual benefit for the public. So this is where I'm afraid, and this would be my first question to you and Felix also. So is there a benefit for the government? Is it easier for the administration of this taxation than the current systems?
So I think, Oliver, is a really important question. I think we need to acknowledge that gasoline tax is probably among the most efficient tax to collect, because you don't need officers, like you were saying, to go out and collect it. You really just need a flow meter on the pump. But we can't sort of hang on to that, because that is going. We know that's going. So something that needs to replace it, that is as efficient as it can be in terms of collection overhead, if I can express it that way. And I think the advantage of this system is that all the collection mechanisms already exist. We know the curb weight of vehicles, it's on the certificate, and the annual distance travelled is collected at the annual technical inspection, except for in the first 3 years. And I think you said in Germany 4 years. So
No, it's 3.
There would need to be mechanisms in there. But I think if you think about it in terms of something like gas or electricity usage, where there's an expectation that people know roughly how much they'll use, and then there's some balancing at the end of each year, I think you could construct a system with the help of technology that was relatively low cost to implement. But I think we need to acknowledge that we can't just hang on to petrol tax, because that is going.
I don't know about the degree of digitalization in the UK, but here I think we have at the moment 1% of smart meters for electric homes. So all the others still have to file a card and send it in. And this is where I'm a bit afraid. So if we really come through with this system, which is, as you said, is easy because we have the curb weight, we have the miles driven, we have the MOT or TÜV where all this is checked. So the question is, how does the number from the TÜV get to the Secretary of Finance? So this is the big challenge that I see.
In the UK, it's already recorded, so it already goes into a central government database. Okay, so there's clearly some international differences here.
This is the big problem. All these car evaluating systems like Car Vertical or whatever they are called, where you can check the history of your car, we don't have anything of this here. There is no general database of German vehicles where anything is recorded. So this would mean you would need to introduce a whole new database here. So this is the issue I see here, that this level of digitalization is lacking here.
Yeah, and I think across Europe it's very much a patchwork. Some countries are better than others. UK is definitely one of the better ones, and it's the same thing in the United States as well. Some states are much better than others. So that's sort of loud and clear as a potential or a thing which would throw up potential political and practical obstacles. I think from my point of view, there's one that sort of even. It's a really fundamental one, is governments don't like creating new taxes. That's a real political high hurdle that governments, it has to be very serious to establish a new tax. And so in this particular case, I think one of the dimensions to think about is whether it is actually a new tax in that sense, or whether it's an evolution of the existing tax. It would clearly be changing that tax from the current patchwork of CO2 related and price related factors. But ultimately it is, you could shoehorn it potentially into the existing structures and just be migrating to this weight times distance as the details of the formula. That might be one way of bringing down the barriers. Otherwise, you're arguing, right, okay, yeah, we're abolishing VED, vehicle excise duty as it currently is, but we're introducing this new thing. That might throw more flags for people than actually just doing an evolution in the background. And ultimately, you've always got the press. The press are, and certain press are very trigger happy in jumping on anything to do with taxation and always then picking on the edge cases of where so-and-so who's got this particular thing and is from a particular community is going to be absolutely hammered by this taxation, which is that's very much a UK thing, but the press in Germany as well.
It's the same
How
here,
does it work? Which particular parts of the press are the most sort of sensitized ones to motoring issues, Oliver?
It depends. It really depends on the topic. So if it comes to the electrification, it goes through all of the press. That's basically the majority of the press is, oh, we need to be 2035, we need to be all electric. So no discussion about alternative fuels, nothing. So this is the general mainstream, I would say. And then if you go into the more dedicated, like Automotorsport and all the, or ADAC Motorwelt, those dedicated to motoring, there you see a broader approach where every technology is discussed and so on. I think it's the same here. If you come up with a new taxation system, everybody would start screaming, "Oh, I am unfair taxed," and they would make up all these examples where somebody is now paying double. We just had a new housing tax introduced here, and of course the government wants to make more money. So for most of the people, they pay more now than they used to pay before. But they are screaming big time. It even makes it into the 8 o'clock news on television and something. If somebody now has to pay 5 times the tax he had to pay before. But you always have to mention the housing tax before was maybe 100 or 150 euros. So it's not like the US where you pay 2% of the value of your house every year. So it's but you will have all these outcries. Of course, you will see them.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
now, Oliver,
sure.
I think that's a really well-made point. I don't think we should sort of hide from the fact that there will be some outcries, like you say. But I think you could construct a communications message, if I can put it like that, that says, overall, this is revenue neutral. This is not about making more tax, and share the numbers to that case, and also say it is easier for consumers to understand. There is a better link. It is replacing things that are not as good, and that won't get rid of the outcry. Of course, it won't. Like you say, there'll always be these edge cases where someone pays double or whatever. But I think if you can sort of construct a consistent message, then you might sort of weather that storm, if I can put it that way.
So for your system now, I could immediately imagine all the peoples that are in favor of electric vehicles. There would be the biggest outcry, because at the moment here in Germany, no vehicle duty tax for electric vehicles. They are exempt for the first 3 years or 4 years or something like this. And of course, no gas tax at the pump. So this there would be the biggest outcry. It would seen as a blockage to the way on electrification. I'm pretty sure this is what would happen immediately. Oh, this is anti-EV. This is blocking the EVs, and the whole system at the end, everybody is paid based on weight. It would get lost. I know that you have this point in where you say, okay, we need to have still some taxation on the remaining gas or diesel or whatever, so that these people pay more to see an advantage on the electric vehicles. This is something that you need to point out, that there's also I wouldn't call it a punishment, but that there's a higher level of taxation still on ICE-powered vehicles.
Yeah. And I think this is a particularly important point, because you're absolutely right that the lobby group in favor of battery electric vehicles will definitely scream that this is an anti-EV measure, when it is absolutely not. It's the ultimate sort of neutral system. But there's another aspect to it which I think is important, is that if we don't apply a tax to battery electric vehicles in line with their environmental damage, we will anchor in people's minds the taxation of battery electric vehicles at 0 or very low levels. And if you anchor people's expectations at a certain level around a price, it's always really hard to get it up. And the biggest example in recent years has been internet content. The early days of the internet, everything was free, and it's been a real slog ever since to get people into the habit of actually valuable content it's legitimate to pay for it. So I think if governments don't at least establish the principle that EVs should pay some tax, they will mightily struggle to then get that tax up and to replace the billions of pounds that is going to be lost. So I think that's one aspect of it. But what you touched on also, the thing that we would in our system, we have to maintain the fuel duty on fossil fuel liquid fuels in the transitionary period to make it a universal system. Now, the question to both of you is this will this be seen as an advantage or a disadvantage in our system? I'm not sure the answer, and I could see either that maintaining a fossil fuel tax could be really accepted very easily by people, because that makes sense, to tax the fossil fuel content. But equally, it's creating an incentive to bring forward zero carbon sustainable fuels, which exactly the electrification lobby will not like. They don't like the competition. So, I mean, coming to both of you, maybe Felix to start. So, how will that net off? Do you think that the maintaining of a fossil fuel liquid tax will make this more acceptable or less acceptable?
Probably beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I think. It will depend on your outlook. But I think from my perspective, encouraging competition is exactly what we ought to be doing for tackling these knotty problems like, environmental impact, climate change, and so on. Backing a single technology in the past has rarely worked. And by encouraging competition, you tend to be able to accelerate progress and end up with the optimal solution. That's not to say markets are perfect. Of course they're not. But an element of competition can help with that. And I think for me, encouraging these different solutions is also part of enabling consumers to pick a solution that works best for them, rather than thinking that they have to have, a 500-mile range battery electric vehicle that weighs, nearly 3,000 kilograms because that's what they perceive they need, because that will be incredibly expensive and not particularly environmentally friendly. And I think, so for me, that's why it's really important that the fossil fuel taxes remains to bring some sort of parity between the different technologies, whilst I think it's a double benefit that it also encourages non-fossil alternatives that could decarbonize the existing fleet. I think the other point is that, and I've been writing about this for 6 or 7 years now, is that it was always going to be the case that at some point for electric vehicles, subsidy would have to turn to taxation. And we're kind of along that pathway now, right? Subsidies have been reduced and in some countries now removed entirely. And I think it is natural that the next steps begin to be taxation. And that's already government policy in the UK. Electric vehicles will pay some, what we call VED, vehicle excise duty tax, from April this year for the very first time. And if you think about other areas where electric cars have had subsidies, such as in London's congestion charge, if you imagine a world where every vehicle is an electric vehicle and they're all exempt, then the congestion charge is completely pointless, right? So it is always it is an inevitability that electric vehicles are on this pathway from subsidy to taxation. And I think the advantage of our system is that it makes it clear that you can do this in a way that is sort of fair, and it's transparent and it's open. And of course, if you have an electric vehicle, you're not going to like paying more tax. I don't like paying more tax on anything. No. But that's an individual reaction. Of course it is. But I think, when you look at it in the round, at least the transparency of this makes it fair.
Yeah. I think you mentioned this several times by now, Felix. You first have to point out it's a neutrality. We collect afterwards the same amount of taxation that we collected before. So there will be people where it's higher, there will be other where it's lower, but we have to make sure that there's a benefit for those people that do something that is environmentally friendly. If it's running an electric vehicle, if it's running on HVO or on e-fuels, whatever. So there needs to be a benefit for these people. So this, I think this is where you need to come, if you want to introduce it with a top-down approach, say, okay, this will stay tax neutral. We have, if I remember the numbers out of your book correctly, you come up with a total number for Germany of 84 billion, I think it is. And you have to say, okay, this is, and you have to explain, okay, this is collected, this is the, what you call the VAD, this is the gas tax, this is the transition tax for purchasing your car, whatever.
The VAT, all these things.
The VAT, yeah, exactly. So you have to come up with this and explain all this. And I actually, there's one thing that if I would be in charge of your regulation, I would change. I would not take the VAT out. I would just leave the VAT as it is, and it's still being collected. But doesn't matter. You have to say that it's a neutrality at the end. So, and I think this is how you could persuade people to this. What I'm just trying to imagine is we have election here in Germany in 3.5 weeks from now, and I'm trying to imagine every of the parties that is running now how they would handle this system. And it would be funny. I can totally imagine the Green Party being totally against it at the moment, because at the moment it feels like a punishment on electric vehicles. They want to promote electric vehicles as cheaper at the moment, and so I don't see it there. Social Democrats most likely the same, and then if you come to the Free Democrats and the Christian Democratic Union, I could see an adoption, and on the other parties I don't comment. And you forgot one important thing, Nick. Even if internet content it gets more and more expensive, Molden and Schmidt stays for free for the upcoming future.
Free forever.
Yeah, free forever. Okay.
Absolutely. Politics. So the politics of it. The thing that the press and governments will immediately go to think about is thinking about the people who are most negatively affected by any change. So in this case, it'll be people who probably drive very long commuting distances to their job in maybe quite a sort of large but not very expensive car, because they have to travel. They maybe got sort of large family or something like that. They're the people who are likely to suffer the most in the taxation. So to round this off, what would your message be, or what do you think the message that the government should be giving to those people who are suffering most, to effectively take the sting out of it, without saying, you're not allowed to say things like, right, don't drive at all or stop driving, because they assume they've got to do that to get to their job, to take their kids wherever. So take their lifestyle as set. What then choices can they make to mitigate it, so they would then say, actually, yeah, I am paying a bit more, but I see why it's fair and I can offset it a bit. What Felix, what's the political message to take the sting out of it?
I think to take the sting out, it would be, next time you need to buy another car, look into what the lightest car that your circumstances can allow you to buy. Because you'll certainly find that you'll pay less tax under our system if you trade your car in for a lighter one, but you may find that a lighter car is also cheaper, because in general, price goes with size. Not always, but in general, that's true. And so I think that would be the message I think you'd have to hammer home. And you could say very clearly, if your car is 150 kilograms less, you will pay £100 less a year. And it's a really kind of clear metric that you can say, if you make this decision, we can directly calculate how much less tax you'll pay.
Yeah. This is a big advantage. If you look into the US, in all these cars, you have what's called the Monroney label, where it clearly says, okay, your annual fuel cost will be whatever if you drive the average. And the same you could do here. You could put a sticker in the car in the showroom saying, okay, your average taxation, if you drive the normal kilometers or miles driven per year in this country, your taxation will be for this vehicle. So this is something that there's a clear advantage of the system. And then if I look on the population today, so who are the people that drive the most? Those are, in my eyes, are the people that drive on business purposes. So they don't pay it by themselves anyhow. It's paid for by the company. If I look at the salesman, the sales representative that does 40, 50,000 kilometers a year driving from customer A to B to C every day, he has a company car. He gets his fuel paid by, or most of them have a company car, get the fuel paid by the company. So they are personally not affected. It's the company that's affected. So there, what you just said, Felix, buy a lighter car next time. They get a new car every 3 years anyhow. Yeah. So this is pretty easy for them. Then the private people that have a long commute to work. I don't know your English system, but here in Germany we have a tax break for this. So for every kilometer I drive to work, I get a tax break. So and as long as this stays in place, I think you can take the punishment out of it a bit. So for every kilometer I drive to work, for the first 20, I get 30 cents tax break. For the next, then I get 38. So this is a system that we have here. If you keep that system in place, you can take the hard punishment out of it a bit, so that people, and then if those people that drive that buy have a private car, they keep it longer, so they need a bit more time to buy a new car. So there it's not every 3 years, it's maybe 5 or 7 years, but there also they would have the incentive then. But otherwise, don't take this tax break away.
Great.
Yeah. And I think, Oliver, the point about fleets is particularly well made, because, of course, if a company is aggregating across 10 or 100 vehicles,
Yeah.
the saving from in 2 or 3 years' time, switching the fleet to a different type of vehicle for all of their salespeople or whatever could be substantial. And it's a very clear saving for that company.
Yeah, we all need a Lotus Elise driven on e-fuels.
Stop there. That's a great finishing line. I like it. So I think we have talked over the last few episodes about all the different crucial aspects of it. I suppose I would reflect and say, ordinarily, the chances of what is quite a significant, dramatic reshaping of vehicle taxation would have an uphill struggle and would take a long time. But right now, and the last few years, the political instability, particularly in Europe and in the United States, and ongoing changes of governments, weakness in the European Union policies, and febrile nature of the environment means that this could happen sooner. It's very difficult to predict, but I think for me, it's fundamental logic and the way it could underpin very weak fiscal positions actually means that it could happen, and it really only needs one occasion for a government to make a decision and be willing to make the argument for it actually to start catching on. And I think I would like to hope that governments and populations would see that even though it is a tax, it is fundamentally aligned with the environmental considerations of motoring, and people would be willing to pay for it as the price of carrying on the freedom of private mobility, which is a privilege. So that's maybe I'm too idealistic, but that's how I see it. So I think we're going to round off there. Felix, thank you very much for joining us again. Oliver, again, for your wise counsel and good questions. Thank you to everyone for listening, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye.